kids. Coming in on Joe in Gulfport says, it's a mad, mad, mad world. Is that a kid's movie?
It's a comedy.
It's a comedy. Tim and Corinth, The Never Ending Story. And someone mentioned The Iron Giant. So that's me asking you today on Good Things. I want you to go back. I want you to put your kid hat on. I want you to think back to childhood. What was that first movie that you would watch over and over? Or the first movie you remember? It doesn't have to be chronologically the first. That you were like, man, it just hit different as a kid. And when you watch it, it kind of takes you back to that time of the innocence of seeing it for the first time and the enjoyment of it.
The one that keeps coming to mind for me was the first time in my life that I realized not all cartoons were Disney. And it was The Secret of Nim, which was this dark story about a mouse. And I remember at the very end, their house is sinking and there's this magical amulet that gave the power to raise the house. It's about all I remember from it, but I remember it was much darker than even something like The Rescuers Down Under, which I think was probably my favorite Disney movie at that time.
I was to say, Disney movies were pretty dark and scary. I mean, they usually started out with some kind of bang, for better or worse, and then obviously they had some moral to it, and there's usually a happy ending. But watching Disney movies as an adult, you're like, oh my gosh, they just went for it from the very beginning.
I'm also remembering a cartoon called Rover Dangerfield that I'm pretty sure was meant to be an adult cartoon, but then they cut it into a kid's cartoon because it had a lot of jokes that flew over my head at the time, but looking back on it, I'm going, wow, that was in a kid's movie?
Joe in Gulfport said there were no VCRs when I was a kid. Either you watched it on TV or you went to the theater. Okay, Joe in Gulfport. So what's the first movie your parents took you to as a kid? And you may have been a little bit older, depending on your generation. Now we start them off a whole lot younger because there's more movies geared towards smaller kids.
You say that, but depending on the generation, you had kids that had the independence and the freedom from their parents to just, all right, here's a dime, get a ticket and a box of popcorn.
And a pickle, the 10-cent pickle. If you're a certain generation, it only cost you like a nickel or so to get in, or maybe it was a dime to get in and then a nickel for the pickle. I can't remember which one it was, but my dad shares that story all the time. I mean, you either got popcorn or you got a pickle. You didn't have the smorgasbord of overpriced candy to pay for.
$7 bag of Reese's Pieces.
Right. Mike from Grand Bay said The Wizard of Oz. That's a good one. I would watch Jurassic Park on repeat as a kid. Oh, yeah.
That was the second movie I ever saw in theaters after seeing Aladdin.
Elizabeth and Gaucher said Cinderella or Bambi. I'm telling my age. No, not so much. I mean, they were still around whenever.
I grew up with Bambi.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Kind of a kid's movie, The Wizard of Oz. When Wizard of Oz first came out,
it was a blockbuster.
It was a blockbuster, and I would think that it lended towards children.
But because of its staying power, I think it's geared more towards kids now.
Yeah. So was it not considered a kid's movie when it first released?
No, it came out as it was primetime event kind of movie.
Huh. Movies have
showing
changed.
off the special effects of the time.
My movies have changed.
Because remember, that was a really big deal when it went from black and white, open the door, and boom, you're in color.
I don't know if I've ever seen the original. I remember, or maybe I just remember the color part, and I forget.
Probably.
I forget the very beginning.
Yeah, because the very beginning, when it's Dorothy on the farm and all the actors that wind up playing the different parts in Oz are work hands on the farm, and then the tornado happens, and she hits her head. She comes to, goes out the door, and there's Oz in color.